Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive podcast where we review manga, anime, cartoons, animation in general, and pop culture. I'm Michael.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Nate.
So in our last episode, our episode 0, we talked about Naruto and their power system, as well as our favorite arcs, characters, villains, and just what that show means for the culture. And in unfortunate circumstances, that episode got cut off. So we're gonna actually, this is why we had an episode 0. So for episode 1 of our actual podcast series, we're gonna be talking about the Avatar: The Last Airbender franchise. So that's the first show, and then we'll also talk about The Legend of Korra. Just kind of to talk a little bit about it, Avatar was released in 2005, February 21st, 2005, and ended in 2008. I believe that would have been towards the fall. Some couple fun facts was, this can lead into our first discussion of favorite characters. Fun fact, Zuko was not written into the show until he was the last character. So their original plan was for Fire Lord Ozai to be the villain for the entire 3 seasons until they realized they can't really make him menacing when he's sitting on his throne for 3 seasons. So they created Zuko to gap and kind of scale villains, if that makes sense. And that's why we really don't see Fire Lord Ozai in battle until the last 4 or 5 episodes of the show. So I brought up that because Zuko's a pretty big fan favorite. What are your guys' favorite characters of the original show first?
Yeah. It's really hard for me to say. I mean, obviously, you like Aang, you like Zuko. I don't know if I feel like Aang probably be. Aang and Zuko are both really cool characters, but I feel like out of the gang, probably the most unique and interesting to me is Toph.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't think there's a bad character, at least in the main cast. There's probably random guy A in book 2 of the show that's bad, but I don't think there's really a bad character in the show. I feel like all the characters have a place, and even one-off characters in episodes, they have a place in the show, and each of those type of characters, the main cast, has something to learn even from that.
What was your personal favorite?
I just remember my true favorite.
Just to not mention one, because I love them all, but Sokka's pretty fun. I like Sokka.
I just remembered, how could I forget Uncle Iroh? The best character in all of Avatar. That's got to be my favorite.
I think my personal favorite is Toph, and I think the reason for it is it's mainly just the year's 2005, and there's not a lot of characters that have a lot of that represent something in terms whether that's disability or background or just kind of maybe rare personality archetype, and I think Toph gives you all that. Yeah. In terms of just kind of very intelligent, but also hot-headed, quick to act, stubborn, and is very opposite with her background of basically being in a noble family. Stubborn and stuff like that, but just kind of, you wrap all of that in, and she is kind of gift wrapped into this character that is not helpless, does not accept hand-me-downs, is not does not have the personality of a royal person, that has millions of dollars and everything that she could ever have. And so that's why I personally like Toph, because everyone has a really good story. Like Nate said, everyone fits to the story and there's no bad character. But in my opinion, unless someone can bring up an anime that I have not seen or a cartoon, I just haven't seen anyone do that. Toph was the opposite of what that character type is supposed to be.
It's kind of like a inversion of the trope.
Yeah.
I think another thing that makes Toph specifically interesting is she has less, I'm not going to say less screen time because I don't really know, but she has less time in the show to make an impact. Aang, Zuko, he was a villain in the beginning.
Yeah.
Aang, Katara, Sokka, Zuko, they're all introduced from the beginning.
Right.
You see them for 3 whole seasons, but you don't see Toph until like a few episodes into season 2. So she has like 30% less screen time, but she makes like just as much as an impact.
Right, yeah. The only character I could say that probably had less screen time is Azula and Suki. And even Azula did well with her time, too.
But she wasn't like as major as
Right.
the gang or Zuko.
Right. But Azula plays her part, and Suki plays the parts that she needs to.
Yeah, she's more of like a minor character in the show.
Right. But I
Even
mean,
then, she's introduced
Yeah.
3 episodes into the season.
Yeah, oh yeah, that is
Right.
true.
Into
Yeah,
the
she's
show.
very early.
but it's just that she pops in every like 6 episodes, or
Yeah.
you hear about her every 6 episodes. But like without Suki, then the gang would be dead by the end of the show.
Yeah, that is true. There's
So-
kind of some I don't know, like auxiliary characters that like support
Yeah.
the gang at different opportunities.
Right.
But they're not they're not with every adventure they go on.
Right, and I guess that kind of goes into my second topic, is kind of just like the writing. It is one of the best written shows I've seen because of that. Not a lot of shows do well where you can throw a character in and they'll be a fan favorite. And Avatar does that tremendously well.
Yeah.
And until the second series. But for the ground series, like everyone plays their part. And they also, all of them really have their own separate storylines a little bit.
Yeah.
It is written kind of like an anime in the sense that, let's take My Hero Academia for an example. For your main favorite characters, they all have different wants and goals, but it all kind of circumvents in. So Katara wanted to, bring waterbending back to women, and, she did that by the end of the first season.
Yeah. Well, also she just wanted to bring it back to rebuild the Southern tribe.
Right, but she also just wanted equality into...
Yeah, because she was like, these people are sexist.
Right, yeah. So she completely changed the North Pole's view on women being able to waterbend. They were only allowed to be healers. And then, her the biggest misogynist of the North Pole ends up being her grandfather. But I don't know, like, what are you guys' thoughts on, like, I guess the writing, and I guess we can go a little bit into, like, story arc and character development.
The writing in the show, like you said, is just, there hasn't been a show, I feel like, that has done what Avatar has done. Sure, there has been like shows that have had parts that I like more, but Avatar has been the most like consistent level of quality throughout the entire show. And we talk about this before the cameras are on, but even my least favorite book of at least the original series, book 2, is like minimum an 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even then, 8 out of 10 is still like, 80% better than a lot of shows.
Yeah, I feel like an 8 out of 10 is like, I would definitely recommend that to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's 8 out of 10 is as good as you can expect most content to be.
And even then, like I said, minimum. I'll have to, it's been a little bit since I've rewatched book 2. Since, like I said, it isn't my favorite part of the series, but 8 to 9 out of 10 is probably the range that it is, in my opinion.
I would say, this is kind of going off of something you said earlier about the writing, but with the different characters, it is like, in good writing, you can feel like every character could be the main character of their own story, and that's definitely true for Avatar. I mean, obviously you have, Aang is obviously the main character. He's very impactful in the world, very fleshed out. They kind of explore his younger, I guess, joyful kind of pure personality, and then reflect it in some dark situations and see how he responds. But you have a lot of other characters like Katara and Toph and Zuko, who have just as much depth to them, and they make large impact in the story. Sometimes even more so than Aang, as you see in some of the stuff that happens later in Korra.
I would say that I really enjoyed season 2, particularly. My favorite book was book 3 for sure, but honestly, like, I would probably give each season 9s like across the board.
Yeah, it's very, very solid. I feel like I would probably give book 1 like the lowest score, probably like 9 or like 8.5. And then like books 2 and 3, I literally couldn't stop watching them. That's like a 10 out of 10 material for me. If I can't put it down, it's 10 out of 10.
That's what I'd give, in my opinion, 1 and 3. 3 is my favorite as well, especially the second half of 3. I think that's some of the best writing, period. It's just such a... Once you start watching it, you can't stop until you've watched it all. And even with some of the quote-unquote slower moments in the show, like in season 1 and 2, it's like you said, it's just so hard to put down once you start.
Right.
And even with some of the things, some of the parts that do feature.
The funny thing is that there are actually kind of a couple filler episodes, but even those filler episodes were like really fun to get into. I mean, like everyone remembers like Secret Tunnel.
Yeah.
I don't think we needed that episode.
Well, even with those slower episodes, because I wouldn't call them like, while they don't contribute a lot to the main plot, they do provide character development for the main characters, even with
true.
Secret Tunnel.
And just more world building.
Yeah, there's not a lot in there, but there is a little character development between Aang and Katara
Right.
and some of the other gang.
Which is needed.
Yeah, another kind of episode that doesn't contribute to the main plot, but does a lot for the world is Tales of Ba Sing Se.
Yeah. I disagree with it, like not doing a lot to the plot. We needed that. Leaves on a vine.
But most people probably remember is the final story about Uncle Iroh, and that just does so much for his character, kind of taking this person who was ostensibly a villain and just giving him so much complexity and depth and a lot of sympathy
Right.
too.
It's like what, I don't remember which one of you said it, but it's like that episode just shows that anyone in that series could be a main character of their own story.
Yeah, because you have all those different, like short little stories about different groups going around Ba Sing Se.
Right. Some people might not even remember that episode because it was very small when you think about it because they cut it into 3 or 4 separate little adventures. That was an era. That song, that is, if people don't really remember, that song was played on Uncle Iroh's actor's deathbed. And the song was originally about himself. So Mako Iwamatsu died from esophageal cancer, and Greg Baldwin picks up Uncle Iroh for the remainder of season 3. And so that song does a lot for me because I will always remember that song. Because not only did it just completely, like everyone else, it just kind of shows Iroh's story as if he was the main character, just for that small snippet. But it gives it so much more world building for that song too. We know exactly how his son died, why his son died, and ultimately why Iroh has become the person that he has became.
Yeah, that whole section explains, getting into more plot details, it explains why Iroh stopped his original siege.
Right. And if it wasn't for his son dying, then, I mean, 100-Year War would probably ended 20 years ago.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't have become like Ozai, but he would have continued being a general in the Fire Nation, probably would have conquered the whole Earth Kingdom.
He would have been the Fire Lord if Aslan died. The only reason why he didn't get Fire Lord was because, 1, they poisoned Aslan, but 2, Ozai's argument was that there's no heir to the throne.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't mentioned this, but it has been like 4 years since I've seen the show.
We just finished the show in October. It took a little bit. But yeah, that was Ozai's argument. Aslan didn't agree with it, but they poisoned it and Ozai assumed the throne. Or presumed, I don't know what the word is, took over the throne. And there's so many, like I would watch a show based on a younger Iroh for that reason. But I genuinely think that Iroh has built a generation's entire moral compass because of it, because of right from wrong.
Yeah, even though he was like the mentor to Zuko, he was kind of like the biggest mentor figure in the whole show.
Yes.
Because even when he was still helping Zuko, and Zuko was in conflict with the gang, Iroh even I remember one episode where Iroh helps them fight off Azula, and he also I think guides them at some other point too.
To bring up that point, there was that between Iroh, there was that mini interaction with Iroh and Toph.
Yes.
I forget which season it's in, but that can also be a figure of how just important Iroh is and how he can be a mentor for everyone throughout the show, not just Zuko.
So what were your guys' favorite episode of the show? If you can't remember the name, that's fine, but even if you want to talk about like favorite moment.
I probably like the end of book 2 the most.
Okay.
It's a very, very climactic fight. I like how it's a large-scale climactic fight, but it's also smaller scale.
Yeah.
Like, if that makes sense, it's not like the massive war between, well, not like a war, but it's not like the massive conquest at the end of book 3.
Right.
It's a very climactic moment, but it's like a fight between 4 characters.
Which one was that again?
So, end of book 2, it's when Azula and Zuko fight Katara and Aang.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The show, since I just watch it all in one sitting pretty much, it just kind of runs together. But yeah, I now know what you're talking about. It's when Aang gets like back pain.
I mean, like, that's also a really great moment. You have this big climax of, oh, he's going into the Avatar state. It'll be fine. You know, he has to beat them all now, and then boom, shut down.
3-month coma. Would you say that was probably your favorite moment?
I don't know about my favorite, but it's definitely when I rewatched it for the first time since when I was little, because I watched Avatar was coming out right when I started to like be a cognitive person.
Yeah. Me too.
And one of my earliest memories is watching the final episode live, like when it came out in like 2008, I believe. But then I want to say like 7 years later, when I was around 9 or 10, that's when I watched the show again from start to finish. And that, I just remember feeling like really, I don't know the correct emotion, but it was just like, whoa.
Right.
For lack of a better word. But it's definitely up there for most memorable parts, I'll say.
I am going to go in a different direction, and I don't think either of you can guess which moment, but Agni Kai is up there, but I will always remember the White Lotus taking back Ba Sing Se.
That was my thought when you said that.
Okay.
I was like, oh, probably the White Lotus.
Yeah, it's not a huge like moment really. Like it's not the conquest, it's not the Agni Kai, it's not end of season 1 with Aang against Zhao, and it's not the prison scene with Azula, Zuko, and Aang and Katara. The reason is because you have 5 or 6 old men, and it's just hops from scene to scene, and it's all beautifully drawn of Paku, and I forget Sokka's mentor's name.
The dude with the sword.
Yes, the dude with the sword, but them sliding on the ice and taking out a couple people, and just watching Zhong Zhong and Boomy, and Boomy is one of my favorite side characters ever. But just the breathing in and out of just Iroh just standing there before all of that, I was just like, this is gonna be the nastiest, like one of the nastiest small fights. Like it wasn't that long, but have you ever seen like a person just stand there and just breathe and just fire coming in and out, just like, setting with his breathing?
I mean, they did call him the Dragon of the West.
Yes. Oh, that reminds me of the coffee scene of him breathing the fire. That was beautiful too, but just to be able to put so many different characters that are all opposites, in terms of their fighting styles and their elements, and they were able to blend that all in like not even a 5-minute like animated run.
Yeah, it was a brief scene, but it was also very impactful.
Right.
Not to like draw on like too many other just kind of random things, but it's similar in he's fulfilling his prophecy kind of in the way Anakin did by subverting it.
Yeah.
In Star Wars.
Right. And that, I agree with that.
Talking about it is making me think, is really bringing up more memories of the show. And there's so many episodes that I just love, even like smaller episodes. Even the smaller episodes, even if there was just one scene that was, I'm going to word this in a way that sounds like it was a bad episode, but it wasn't. But even if an episode that has just like one scene really towards the story, I still love those episodes, like the library. I forget what the library's name was, but that build up to the eclipse and the eclipse fight, even if that fight led to nowhere, it was still, that's still one of my favorite parts as well. It's just the whole build up to that and how that failure makes them rethink about, or makes the Avatar gang rethink about how they'll fight Ozai the next time.
Right.
And especially during that fight, seeing Zuko's arc as well, and see him really challenge his thoughts and opinions and his morals about what he wants.
Yeah.
Right.
In a way that was like, I wouldn't say the completion of his arc, but as far as his journey towards heroism, that was the completing moment when he faced Ozai. I mean, obviously there's a lot of great world building and writing in Avatar, and you could do a lot taking a more serious take. You see a bit of that in Korra. But part of the magic of Avatar is that it's a show made for children. The intended audience is children, but it is done so well and written so masterfully that everyone can love it.
It's the perfect definition of a family-friendly show.
Yeah. It's intended for a younger audience, but it's just so good. And the writing, they intentionally didn't write it dumbed down. The writing is very intelligent, so it can be watched by anyone. So I think it's part of the kind of the magic of Avatar to retain that original identity of being geared towards that younger audience.
Yeah, it's a show for kids with the main cast pretty much being, I think Aang's the youngest at 12.
Yeah.
And then Zuko's the oldest at 16, I believe.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And they age up, yeah.
But even then, it can be enjoyed by anyone because that writing is so detailed and so good.
Right. To get more into that, the show runs through loss, sacrifice, death, and how they write it is something that you as a parent can walk your kids through. And you can try to make a more adult-oriented show, and I would still watch it, but it's not going to feel like Avatar if they still don't add the colorful aspects of it, where you have those less plot-like stories where you're watching these relationships build over time, and you're watching them become a family, or you're watching Aang and Tara's love slowly grow over 3 seasons. Adult animated cartoons and animation is not necessarily built like that. It can be, but with the categories that we have now, the shows that we can look at now, we haven't had one yet that can balance that. Because what people expect are, pardon my language, but sex or lots of violence. That's what they see adult animation is that like, well, now let's see relationships actually get, actual relationship conflict. That's something Avatars can't have other than the familial conflict of like Zuko, Azula, and Fire Lord Ozai, but it doesn't get into very dark, abusive themes that we typically see in shows like Invincible that will cover down the line, or The Boys. It's a comic book adaptation. The royal family of the Fire Nation, you can see the abuse, but other than Aang getting electrocuted, you don't actually see Ozai burn Zuko.
Yeah, I would agree. Avatar is very, I guess part of the intelligent writing is it tackles very heavy themes, but in a way that's approachable, that anyone can approach it and not walk away like scarred or horrified.
Right.
Because they just saw something like terrifying on TV.
Right.
Yeah. And like you said, if there was a more mature Avatar or adaptation of Avatar, I would still watch it because I just love the characters and I love the series, but I don't think it would come close to that magic that the original series had.
So with Jett, I think what his character mainly does in the beginning is he complicates the conflict. And from the beginning of book 1, Water, it's the gang versus the Fire Nation. Every Fire Nation person that come up is just a bunch of guards, soldiers,
Right.
people constantly trying to capture them. But then Jett shows another side to that of Jett wants to fight the Fire Nation, but he goes about it completely the wrong way. He terrorizes normal people, innocent civilians. And it shows that, first off, not all villains are from the Fire Nation. And then secondly, not everyone from the Fire Nation is a villain. There's a lot of innocent civilians that probably want no part in the violence the Fire Nation, spreads across the world.
Right.
I mean, you basically nailed it on the head with that. Just the whole viewpoint of Jett in the show, always trying to find that conflict and it's almost like he's trying to find the conflict, even if it's like something little, and make it as big as possible so that it can feel like he's doing the most to stop the Fire Nation.
Jett is a very special character, and that entire small arc of the show really does a number because, like Nate and Josh said, was that for the first time they actually are seeing the perspective of Fire Nation citizens, specifically that they're now collateral, and if I remember correctly, like he was going to blow up the dam.
Yeah, he was going to flood a whole town.
Yeah, and first off, that's completely even just that is beyond what I would think any normal freedom fighter militia would be capable of doing. It's one thing to rob them, it's another to completely flood a town. But it also, Jett has one of the most complex character arcs because I'm trying to remember how it happened, but he got kidnapped by the Dai Li.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure he sacrificed himself for the gang to get out.
Yeah, during his time, because at some point he got to Ba Sing Se.
Right.
And then he got snatched by the Dai Li for, I believe, talking about the war or something.
Yeah.
Because there is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Right.
I think it was he saw Iroh heating up his tea with fire.
Yeah.
And they were like in that like transportation area. And he started freaking out, being like, "You firebended! I saw him! We were firebending the tea!"
And then I think that conflict with the Dai Li let Jett see that, guess what? Fire Nation isn't the only bad people here.
Right.
And in that he learned and he kind of recalibrated his morals. And then his goal was to help the gang after he discovered that Dai Li had Appa captive. But then he did eventually die at the hands of their leader. Just they don't say he died, but he got hit by a rock very, very hard.
Yeah. He got
It's the whole joke in I forget what the theater troupe was called.
The play, yeah.
Did Jett just die?
It was like, it was never really clear.
Yeah, he got brainwashed, right?
Yeah. He got brainwashed, and that is what, like, once he snapped out of it, like, that's when he got hit. And then Toph was able to tell, like, oh, yeah, he's lying about he'll be fine. That's one of my favorite things because that, although it seemed like, okay, that's a loose end, the freedom fighters fought the war with the gang.
Yeah, they came back.
And I'm glad about that. There's even some theories that, like, Toph and the Duke had a relationship. And it's a theory that I kind of like just because it's consistent and it makes sense. You can show that they were kind of comfortable with each other at the end of the show. At the ceremony, they were hanging out together.
I feel like in Avatar, not to talk about shipping too much, but in
Right.
Avatar, you see a lot of different characters. I mean, like, not characters, but you see a lot of different people in the fan base say, oh, this character should be with this character, or like, Zuko and Katara. But I think that's just a reflection of the chemistry and the writing between all of the characters. Like, Sokka works well with Toph on screen. You see a lot of dynamics between Zuko and Katara. Like, every character in the show has an interesting dynamic with most of the other characters.
Fun fact, but Katara and Zuko were originally supposed to end up together.
I'm glad they changed that.
Yeah, I am too. It kind of makes sense, but it just doesn't fit. They have two separate personalities, even though they do mesh together.
I mean, they literally are fire and water.
All right.
Not to go back on a subject we talked about, but the Fire Island, it's something similar to that, but the
Ember Island?
Ember Island theater. It's one of my personal favorite episodes, but for completely different reasons. Because I feel like it's Avatar is a show that, like we mentioned, the writing is so good. Even in that episode, the writing's so good that they can even write good jokes to make fun of it.
Yeah.
Or
And
as a parody itself.
kind of to talk about that was essentially a recap episode. Most people hate recap episodes, like,
That was fun.
but they did it in a entertaining way.
Yeah. We're
I
that
mean,
real quick.
one thing Nate reminded me of is he said Ember Island, and that's the I believe that's the episode where we see Zuko. I'm blanking on all their names. But you see Zuko, Ty Lee,
May.
May, and Azula. They kind of have like their own, not an adventure, but they try to like connect with people.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the exact episode.
It wasn't the episode with the theater troupe, but it was.
Okay, it was a separate
They were on.
one. Yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah.
sure they went to like Ember Island or
They
something.
did, yeah.
It was actually. It kind of showed the villainous gang in a more human, sympathetic light, even for characters like Azula, who is like one of the most inhuman characters aside from like Ozai. You kind of see a sympathetic side to them in that episode.
Yeah, that was, you can really see how sheltered they were and how they were raised differently from other people. Specifically Azula, how she really cannot communicate with people. And genuinely, I think even if she had her mom still around, I don't think the way she was raised would have been able to help her socialize with people.
Maybe if Ozai wasn't in the picture,
Maybe.
but having that.
She didn't grow up with a lot of kids, is my point, other than May and Ty Lee.
Yeah, but having that, in addition to not having a lot of other peers to connect to, having that kind of rotten influence,
Yeah.
just kind of forced Azula or kept her from maybe overcoming her like violent tendencies.
Right. No, I definitely agree. And I think that's the only reason why Zuko was able to pull out of that, because he interacted with more people. I don't know what more topics we can talk about the original show, but if either of you have an idea, if not, we can move to Korra.